Good morning, everyone. My name is Melanie Moultrie. I'm the Home-Based Services Manager with Best Starts for Kids. We are so pleased you're joining us this morning for the community-designed home-based programs and practices prenatal to 5 request for proposals. That is a mouthful. And of course, this is the information session for the RFP. I will be joined by my colleague, Sarah J., in order to talk about the data and evaluation piece of this body of work. And we will go ahead and get started. It looks like we have lots of folks on the phone this morning. So we have about an hour 15 minutes together. And so what we'll do is we'll start with an overview of Best Starts for Kids. We will walk through the key elements in the request for proposal, and then we will open it up for a question and answer period. So at this time, you should all be on mute, and then we can go ahead and unmute you for the Q&A portion of the conversation. Please do note that this presentation is structured around the RFP itself, so it may be really useful for you to follow along either in an electronic version of the RFP or in a print version of the RFP. So we will we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll start with the intro section, which is an overview of Best Starts for Kids. And just as a reminder, though I'm sure many of you have heard it at this point, the vision of Best Starts for Kids is that we want to see more babies born healthy, more kids thrive, and more young people grow up to be happy, healthy, successful adults. In the prenatal to 5 strategy areas, you can see the 3 key results here that we're all working toward, which is that babies are born healthy and are provided with a strong foundation for lifelong health and well-being, that King County is a place where everyone has equitable opportunities to be safe and healthy as they progress through childhood, building academic and life skills to be thriving members of our community, and that communities are safe, welcoming, and healthy environments that help improve outcomes for King County's children and families, regardless of where they live. Of course, all of our work at Best Starts for Kids is rooted in an equity and social justice framework. So what does this mean? It means that BSK recognizes that persistent inequities exist, especially by race and by place, and that in many cases they're getting worse and threatening collective prosperity of families in our city and in our county. BSK is working to invest in organizations that are reflective of and embedded in the communities they serve, and those that recognize and address the disparities and disproportionalities that exist in our communities. And so as a result, of course, of persistent and intensifying inequities, we'll focus our investments on communities where those inequities are the greatest in order to help dismantle the systems that lead to disparities, in particular using strategies that are informed by an equity lens. And you'll see that these values and an equity lens embedded both in the strategy around this body of work as well as the scoring rubric, so how it is that we will select proposals for this particular funding opportunity. Okay, just hold on 1 second, please. We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty. Okay, super. We're back in the game. Thanks so much. So first, I wanted to provide a little bit of information about the larger home-based services strategy. And just as a quick reminder, the home-based services strategy is one of the prenatal to 5 strategies. So we are focused exclusively on that period. So for the larger home-based services strategy, we are going to be we're working to build a continuum of services, and we're going to be doing that by investing in a range of different programs. The first is evidence-based programs. So those are programs that use a standardized, well-defined model that has been proven effective through rigorous research design when implemented with fidelity. where we invested in evidence-informed program. Those are programs that use a documented model that has been shown to produce positive outcomes in at least one comparison study. And then also we're investing in community-designed programs and practices. And those use approaches that are designed for a specific community. They should be valued by that community, embedded in cultural and social conditions, and or address populations for which evidence-based programs and evidence-informed programs have not yet been developed. And so we just want to be really, really clear here that when we think about the whole continuum of services we're building through these different investment strategies, that this particular investment strategy is focused on community-designed programs and practices, and that we have already made investments in evidence-based and evidence-informed programs. Evidence-based and evidence-informed programs are not eligible to apply for this RFP, and we'll take a deeper dive on that in just a second. So we also wanted to share that we did a lot of upfront work to think about how to develop this particular RFP. So Best Starts for Kids partnered with the University of Washington School of Nursing to conduct an intensive engagement and data collection process. So we actually partnered with 15 service provider organizations that implement both evidence-based practices as well as a range of other services focused on prenatal to 5 or services delivered in the home. So we talked to 15 different provider agencies, and we also partnered with Community Cafe Collaborative to conduct 3 community conversations. And so what we were trying to learn in order to inform this particular request for proposals was to understand the most important elements of both evidence-based and evidence-informed prenatal to 5 home visiting programs and other home-based or family support services being implemented in King County. We wanted to learn about the strengths, the gaps, and barriers to home-based services that are happening in our county, to learn about what kinds of home-based services organizations would like to provide for families but currently cannot, and to outline the kinds of system supports that programs need in order to be successful. And so embedded in the RFP, you will find a hyperlink that has a lot more information about this particular effort that was undertaken through this partnership between Best Starts, in particular my colleague Michelle Sardieu and myself, and Nadine Martinez at the University of Washington. So what you'll find in there is a deeper dive about the organizations that participated, what our key findings were as a result of those learning conversations with providers and communities, and how that led us to develop this particular RFP. So please do feel free to take a look at that hyperlink for more information. Okay, so eligibility. As is the case for most Best Starts for Kids, eligibility, organizations that are eligible are not-for-profit organizations, community-based organizations, tribes and tribal organizations, schools and school districts, public or governmental agencies serving our county, and in particular, small nonprofits and community-based organizations are encouraged to submit proposals. And we'll provide a number of capacity-building supports to really support small nonprofits and community-based orgs. So, a note on programs. So you'll find as we talk about this RFP that it's heavily focused on developing new programs because we are really trying to cultivate the development of new programs designed to meet local communities. However, we are also interested in supporting programs that are trying to make a significant improvement to or further develop a maybe young or maybe young already operating programs. And then also, if there is a program trying to make a really specific, pretty considerable adaptation to an already well-defined practice or a program that has some level of research evidence, that we're interested in supporting that as well. So just to summarize that again, this funding opportunity will heavily focus on development of new programs, but that programs that are already operating are eligible if you are interested in making a really significant improvement, change, or undertaking a significant developmental effort. And then finally, there are a number of models or programs that are not eligible for this RFP, primarily because we have already funded them through other RFPs in the home-based services strategy. In particular, those are home-based evidence and evidence-informed programs. So those include, for example, Parent-Child Home Program. We have a partnership with the City of Seattle and the United Way of King County. Parent-Child Home Program is administered through United Way of King County and not eligible to apply as the formal Parent-Child Home Program through this funding opportunity. Similarly, Parents as Teachers is not eligible to apply because that was funded through the evidence-based and evidence-informed RFP. Nurse-Family Partnership is not eligible to apply because those services were already increased through BSK, though they are delivered by the county. Child-Parent Psychotherapy is not eligible to apply. Health Connect One community-based doula is not eligible to apply for this funding opportunity as that program. So organizations that deliver those programs but want to apply for another set of services are eligible to do so, but not you're not eligible to apply for that intervention specifically. Okay, so let's dive into this particular RFP. So home-based services are a type of relationship-based support provided to expecting parents and parents of children birth to age 5 in the places where they live. This RFP is intended to expand availability of services that use other available forms of evidence, such as community-defined evidence and practice-based evidence. So as I said before, home-based services is this large bucket. Evidence-based home visiting is one of the strategies under that bucket. We've already funded it. This funding opportunity is focused on building, supporting programs that utilize community-defined evidence or practice-based evidence. And if you don't already, as part of this work, we will support you in building that evidence. Okay. So this particular funding opportunity is going to be a little bit different from some of the other Best Starts for Kids funding opportunity. And that's because, as I said before, we're really focused on launching a number of new programs. And in doing so, we're building in a really intentional program development and implementation planning phase. Programs that are awarded through this particular funding opportunity would first participate in Phase 1. That's the program development and implementation planning. Phase 1 will be a 6-month phase. There will be $50,000 associated with that phase. We'll take a deeper dive on this in just a second and really talk about what the details of this work are. But we will basically be supporting a funded program to participate in program development activities. Once all of those program development activities are complete, you'll move into Phase 2, which is program implementation. You'll receive approximately $250,000 per funded program year, and this will be for 2 program years, essentially. It will be for 23 months. So just to summarize that, programs funded through this funding opportunity will get a 6-month award to do program development efforts, and then a 2-year award to do program implementation of about approximately $250K per year. There are some more details about that, which again we'll look at in just a second. Okay. So when you're thinking about the program that you want to apply for, we're encouraging you to really focus on 3 distinct aspects of that. And we're going to unpack each of these. But your body of work should be informed or shaped by these 3 different sets of information. The first is called foundational principles. The second is called program requirements. And the third is core components. So let's take a look at each of these different things that you should think about as you're developing your proposal and your proposed program. Okay, so the first set of things we want you to think about are foundational principles. Okay, so all proposed programs should be rooted in one foundational principle, and that is to embed equity in program policy and practice. Again, there's more detail outlined in the RFP about what we mean by that, but all organizations applying should think about really how their program is rooted in that particular approach to the work. We also want you to think about how your program meets at least two of the following principles. The first is focused on reducing sources of stress in the lives of children and families. The second is supporting responsive relationships between children and caregivers. The third is strengthening core life skills. And the fourth is promoting healthy birth outcomes. So just to repeat that again in summary, your program must promote equity in policy and practice. Your program must meet at least two of those foundational principles. So there's four, and you have to meet at least two of those. The sort of next category of things we want you to think about as you're developing your program and developing your proposal is meeting program requirements. So we've set a couple of bare minimum requirements that you must meet in order to apply for this particular funding opportunity. So the first is about setting. And so home-based services, of course, are typically provided in the home setting. However, because of the feedback we got through our provider conversations and our community cafes, we wanted to expand that a little bit. One of the things we really learned is that families not only want those services in the home, but they want other opportunities for connecting to support networks outside of the home, particularly culturally based support networks. And so rather than all of the services being required to be in the home, we are setting the bare minimum that 60% of your home-based program must be delivered in the home setting or alternate safe setting proposed by the families. And that up to 40% can be a community-focused element of a more intensive home-based program. The second program requirement is that the supports that you're providing to families must be relationship-based. So families must experience changes through the relationship between that home visitor and the caregiver, and the caregiver and the child. So it should be a relationship-based approach to how you do your home-based service. At least 60% of the service that you're proposing should focus on the child and parent or the broader kin group. So again, we're really thinking about how is it that we're cultivating this relationship between the caregiver and the child to really support attachment. We wanted to just sort of set some, or provide some notes rather, around dosage. We have not set a minimum dosage requirement. Again, this information came to us from our community conversations, where we learned that dosage could, in some circumstances, be a barrier for families who are contending with a lot of sort of urgent crises and a lot of issues. And so we didn't say, you have to serve families at least 2 times a month. We didn't set any of those kinds of requirements. However, we are requiring that the program should include a number of visits that make sense for the community. So what are the community needs and how is dosage driven from what the community needs and also has time for? But also it has to be with a frequency that still supports relationship development, because that is a fundamental part of supporting attachment. And finally, the proposed program must contribute to the Best Starts for Kids secondary and headline indicators outlined in the RFP, in particular in Section 3, the evaluation. Sarah J. will take us through those a little bit more in depth later on. You will be required in the application to select which of the outcomes your particular intervention is designed to meet. Okay, and the third category, the third bucket of information we want you to think about as you're developing and proposing an RFP is this thing called core components. So the core components are the most important elements that make up a program. They are what make your program your program. They're what make it unique and distinct. They have to be present in order to say that you were doing that program well. And so you're going to be asked in your proposal to identify up to 6 core components. And we want you to think much more broadly beyond components as a set of activities. Because there are actually lots of dimensions that can make up your program and that make your program and sort of set the parameters for how you know when you're doing it well and how you are not doing it well. And so some of the categories of core components we want you to think about are, of course, the types of activities, right? This is sort of what you're doing to support your families in getting to better outcomes. And there are a whole range of activities that are outlined in the RFP that you're going to want to take a look at as examples. Again, these are example categories for the core elements of your program, and they're example types, right? So there's a whole list of types of activities you might include. Again, those are not meant to be prescriptive and they're not meant to be exhaustive. They're just supposed to be examples. So some of the other kinds of things you might want to think about as sort of the core components of your program are staffing qualifications or staffing requirements. So you may know, for example, that in order to make your program, that all of the staff that you hired must be trusted members of the community, for example. Or maybe they're all required to be nurses or licensed midwives, right? Those are very different staffing qualifications, but of course fundamentally shape how it is that you do your work. The third category that we've included there is policy or practice guidelines. So there may be a specific policy or practice guideline, again, that makes your program and that makes it unique. So I think one of the examples that we have provided there around policy and practice guidelines is that all staff receive reflective supervision. So for example, if you have a trauma-informed model of care and you're serving families who are facing high rates of trauma, having reflective supervision, having that additional support may be a core component of your model that helps ensure that staff are well supported and that staff have support and capacity to maintain both quality and longevity of their work. Another kind of category or core component that we've included is assessments or screenings. So all sorts of different programs do all sorts of different screenings, from developmental screening to maternal depression screenings. And again, what you choose to do, assess, or screen for is going to go back to what are the values of our program and how we do our work. And the final category that we've included there is use of curricula. So is there a particular curricula? So many home visiting programs, for example, use promoting first relationships. That may be relevant to how you want to do your work, and it may not be. It may not accommodate the needs of your families. And so you will be, again, in your application asked to detail some of these elements of what your program is. You don't have to have a fully baked approach to the work. The point of our program development work in phase 1 is to really develop that approach, to document that approach, to think about what good practice looks like and what weak practice looks like, and then eventually to measure it. So you don't have to have it all solved now, but we do want to know what it is that you're really thinking about for your unique approach to prenatal to 5 home-based services. Okay. And this is the the very bold warning signal here. So just as a quick reminder, and again, this is outlined and highlighted in the RFP. This RFP does not require or specify the use of particular core components. We're not requiring that. We're just asking you to tell us what you want to do. The categories of core components provided in the RFP are examples. They're not meant to be prescriptive. And the examples listed under each of the category types, again, are also just meant to provide a demonstration of the concept. We are not telling you that these are the only choices. We are just giving you examples. So if there are other ways of work that are not included in here, by all means, that's what we're looking for here, for you to define your approach to the work. Okay. So, sorry, I lost my place here. So again, taking us back to the RFP, I wanted to talk through a little bit how we'll do our work together over the next 2.5 years if you're funded. So here is where we're going to unpack some of the details around these 2 phases of this particular award structure. So again, phase 1 of this particular funding opportunity, it's a 6-month phase, and it's going to focus on creating foundational program development tools. So if you're awarded, you'll participate in a series of workshops, and you'll be provided with individualized capacity building supports to create the tools outlined below. So the program development tools that we're going to work on together are, we're going to develop a practice profile. Again, there's a detailed definition in there, but what a practice profile is it is a documentation of our ways of work. And so it asks us the question, what are our values and principles? And we document them. It asks us about what the core components of our model are. It asks us what sound practice looks like, what developmental practice looks like, and what weak practice or underdeveloped practice looks like. And so we'll have the opportunity to partner with the capacity building team through a series of workshops to develop that practice profile. Then programs will develop a theory of change. A theory of change really just maps sort of the linkages between the different program elements that you've developed and the outcomes that you hope to see with children and families, both in the short and long term. You'll develop an implementation plan, which is just really a strategic effort at getting ahead of what implementation will look like, what kinds of infrastructure or organizational supports you need to put in place in order to begin implementing that particular program with quality. And then you'll develop a 2-year program budget for phase 2. So just again to summarize, each program funded through this RFP will first receive $50,000 for a 6-month program development process, where you will partner with a capacity building team. You'll develop tools. The tools you'll develop are a practice profile, a theory of change, an implementation plan, and a 2-year budget. And you will be asked to send staff to participate in those activities, and you will get paid per completion of each of those particular program development products. It'll be a 6-month period, and we anticipate 10 awards. Okay, if programs complete all of their products, right? All of those program development efforts, they will then participate in phase 2. So everyone who gets awarded in phase 1 will also move into phase 2. You won't have to recompete. We're still developing the contract structure, but there may actually even be a 2.5-year contract. Either way, phase 2 of this award will focus on installing any new infrastructure needed to support your new program, putting that new program into practice, and using rapid cycle learning and improvement as the program is implemented. So as you can see here, for year 1, you will receive $275,000. This is $250,000 in base funds plus $25,000 in startup funds to do things like develop curricula, develop training manuals, purchase IT to support your program. Anything that you need to do to get this program off the ground will come out of those $25,000 in startup funds, and then you'll get $250,000 in program operating funds. In year 2, you'll get $257,500. That is your base funds, $250,000 times a 3% increase. And then in year 3, you'll get another increase on top of that. Year 3 funding is contingent upon performance and upon continued funding availability. So again, in summary, for this phase, you'll receive 2 years of approximately $250,000 per year in funding to implement and improve on your program. And again, everyone awarded in phase 1 will get phase 2 funding, barring they complete their program development requirements. Okay. So other relevant information. So we have sort of spent the bulk of the time here talking about the particular RFP, the Prenatal to 5 Home-Based Community Designed RFP, and what the sort of programmatic elements are going to look like. Now I just want to take a little bit of a deeper dive on what the funding priorities are for this particular opportunity. So first and foremost, as we've already shared in talking about the equity lens and talking about the purpose of community designed programs and practice, is that we will invest, prioritize investing in programs that meet the needs of communities of color, low-income communities, and limited English-speaking communities, populations and communities experiencing significant service gaps. So if there's a particular community with a significant unmet need, certainly that's where we would prioritize our investments. We'll prioritize investing in organizations that are connected to and embedded in the community served. And finally, also just want to note that we'll prioritize supporting programs that are not already supported by significant public revenue streams. So if you have a program that is very well supported already by other public revenue streams, it's very likely you are eligible to apply, but it is not likely that you would receive funding because it is not a funding priority. Okay, so now I'm going to hand it over to Sarah J., who is going to walk us through the evaluation piece.
Thank you, Melanie, and thank you again, everybody, for joining us this morning. I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can anticipate around evaluation if you're funded through this RFP, as well as some tips for incorporating different kinds of data into your proposal. So we'll start with the slide that you're looking at here. With Best Starts for Kids, with our evaluation framework, we're looking at what we call indicators. And these are things we really want to improve for families all across King County. And they're not anything that any one program or even any one strategy is responsible for changing independently, but something that we're hoping that synergistically, all of Best Starts for Kids as an initiative will make meaningful contributions to. So what you see on the slide is not a complete list of indicators, but it's some of the ones that are particularly relevant to this RFP. And you'll also see a link. We're going to look at that in a few minutes, where you can explore those indicators in more detail. So things that you probably want to know about evaluation specific to this RFP. If you've looked through the RFP, you'll see that you have an opportunity to select which indicators you plan that your program will impact. And we just want to be really clear that we don't expect all programs to impact all indicators, so you can just select those for the activities that you think are most relevant to your program. The second thing to know about this RFP is that we have selected this community-informed home visiting services for a bit of a deeper dive of evaluation than some of our other programs are going to be getting, because we think it's really important to document and to provide evidence about the importance of having community-informed systems. So we're currently in the process of hiring an external evaluator that will be helping this. If you're curious what we're looking for, you can read more about that RFP on the Best Starts blog, but if you take a look, you'll see that we're really prioritizing looking for someone with experience in collaborative and participatory evaluation work. So that's what you can hopefully expect of that evaluation partner when they do come on board. Because we will be asking everybody funded through this to be participating in those evaluation efforts. So as Melanie was describing, there's 2 implementation phases, and in the first phase, you'll be developing your theory of change, and that is a tool that we'll be using in evaluation. So what you plan to do and the change that you expect to see from your program. And then finally, you'll be matched with capacity building supports for data system purchasing as needed as well. So based on all that, I didn't say it explicitly, but I do want to make it clear you do not need to submit an evaluation plan as part of your proposal. That's something that we'll be working on together between you, King County, and our evaluation partners. What you're probably most focused on right now is putting together that proposal, getting that funding in the first place. And when we think about using data in your proposal, we really encourage you to start by thinking about your story. Look at those funding criteria that are listed in the RFP and that Melanie talked about. She talked about communities experiencing service gaps. There could be a really powerful story about that could help reviewers understand why you see a need for your program in your community. Another one is being embedded in your community. Another place you could find a really great and powerful story to share with reviewers about how community-driven your work is. So think creatively about what's the story you want to tell about the need for this program in your community, be it the gaps that you're seeing in what people are experiencing, the strengths that you bring to the table and want to draw on. And once you have an idea about that story, think about what information will help make it convincing. And then go out there and put together a few pieces of that information or data. And when I say data, what do I mean? We are thinking very broadly about data in Best Starts for Kids. Numbers are often the first things that come to mind when people say data. And absolutely, that's one kind of data that you can choose to use to tell your story. You probably might have a lot of numbers already from program work that you're already doing. King County has lots of data we're putting out there that we want to be accessible to those who are interested in using it. And that's can be a great option. Maps and pictures, again, that help tell your story can also be very powerful. And then finally, stories, words, qualitative data. I have an example here that I took from a report from the Urban Institute. We do ask if you use any pictures or client quotes, be sure to protect the confidentiality of the people that you're working with and make sure that you're telling their story in a way that's respectful and in a way that they are comfortable with. But with that consideration in mind, telling stories can be a really, really powerful way to help reviewers understand the need for your program. So I mentioned briefly that King County is putting out quite a bit of data out there. So we're going to take just a moment to take a look at that now. And I like to do this because I find that if you choose to explore this data, I want you to feel comfortable, like you know what you're doing, clicking around our shiny new website. But it's not required. It's not going to be valued more highly than other sources of information. We're going over it today so that everybody involved in BSK can know what these big indicators that we're focused on are and again, just feel comfortable looking for data that they are interested in on the website. So this is our Best Starts for Kids indicators page. You'll see there's our 4 main strategy areas. You also have an email address that if you don't understand what you're looking at, you're welcome to email us, and we're happy to help you out. And then scrolling further down, we actually have our indicators. So they're organized into these different strategies. Prenatal to 5 obviously is the most relevant for this one. So let's take a minute and pick one to look at. How about this? Access to needed mental and behavioral health services. We did a Best Starts for Kids health survey. We asked parents many questions, and a lot of this data you can find on our indicators page. One of them was about if their child had needed these kind of health services, did they in fact have access to it? So if you click, you'll get taken to what we call a data visualization that shows you information about that. And the first page will tell you a little bit more about what you're looking at and usually has a map. So here we can say that there is a little bit of a range in the percent of parents who felt that their kids had access to the services that they needed. Scrolling up to the top, you'll see that there's different tabs. These are really important and really easy to miss. But let's click on the demographics tab. And we have broken down the data as basically as far as we can because we know communities are really interested not just always in the big picture, but in data that actually reflects more specific geographic, cultural, linguistic, racial, and ethnic communities. So on the demographics tab, you'll see that we have pretty detailed race and ethnicity breakdowns, income, region, school district, language spoken at home, respondent's age, respondent's gender, and when it's a respondent, that's the parent or caregiver who replied to the Best Starts for Kids health survey. So typically, but not always the parent, sometimes another form of caregiver. And depending on the indicator that you're looking at, we don't have all of these different demographic categories available for all of them, but we put out as much as we can in the interest of helping folks find whatever is most helpful and unique and specific to the community that they're seeking to serve. So be sure to check out that demographics tab if you're looking for specific information for communities that you serve here. And then let's click on the custom demographics tab. I will say when you see that little line with the little arrow there, that means we don't have enough respondents to share the data. So obviously for us, protecting everybody's confidentiality is absolutely critical. So for some things you won't see as many of these as for others. But here's a place that if you really want to try to drill down and get a more specific look at a community, you can. So let's take a look here and let's compare region. If we see it there, right there, region, and child's age group. So what the custom demographics tool allows you to do is to look at subgroups within those demographic categories. So on the demographics page, we can see if there's differences by child's age or by region. And here we can actually look at differences by age within each region. It looks like not a lot of parents of kids 0 to 5 answered the question here, so it's maybe less helpful than some of the other ones will be. But you can see that it's broken down by within each region. It'll give you the answers for the different age groups. So if you're serving like a language group in a specific community, you could break down region by language or by race and ethnicity or things like that. And because those groups are smaller, I do want to give fair warning that you will see some more suppression in the custom demographics tab. But if you are loving our data and really want to dig to find what's most important and relevant to your community, this can be a helpful tool to do that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Melanie. I hope that these tips have been helpful for you in thinking through getting some information together for your RFP and knowing what to expect for evaluation.
Thanks, Sarah. Okie dokie. Great, thanks. So thank you so much, Sarah, for walking us through the data and evaluation piece. So next we're going to move on to just a couple of little technical details that are outlined in the RFP. And the first is the timeline. So the RFP was issued on April 11th, so at the end of last week. Of course, right now we are in the first info session for this particular funding opportunity. We'll have a second one this afternoon at the Snoqualmie Public Library and a third on Wednesday at the White Center Library. So if you feel like you want to hear this all again, you're certainly welcome to join. I think the other dates worth hitting here are that the RFP is going to be due on May 21st, and that we hope to have a list of awarded programs available by June 21st. Again, right now, the intention for the contract term is to do a 2.5-year contract for this funding opportunity. Okay, we want to remind you that as is the case for all Best Starts for Kids proposals, there's free technical assistance available to support program development. And in order to access that, there is a hyperlink. That hyperlink is embedded in the RFP. It should take you to the information of our technical assistance providers, and that there's a range of services that can be provided by those providers. And those are, they could be determining whether or not your proposed program is a good fit for the particular funding opportunity, providing guidance on optimal ways to answer the questions, and also things like supporting application review and editing. So it could be that you draft your whole proposal by yourself and send it along for feedback in that way. But they are available for intensive consultation for all of those dimensions. We do ask that you reach out to technical assistance providers as early as possible. And this is because there are a limited number of TA providers and, of course, many organizations that are requesting support. And the more opportunity they have to plan in advance, the better off all programs that are applying will be, as well as the workload of our TA providers. So we do ask that you reach out as soon as possible. Please only reach out to one provider at a time. Wait for 24 hours to see if they respond, and then if not, you can feel free to reach out to a second. If you have a challenge in reaching out to a technical assistance provider, please notify CPRES, the CPRES email. We'll walk through that in just a second, but it's also embedded in the request for proposals. Please note that technical assistance is available for a 1-month period. So it will sort of open on April 20th, and it will close on May 18th. So no requests for TA will be available after May 18th. Okay. The next thing I want to just call your attention to in the request for proposals is the rating criteria. Your proposal will be directly assessed on that rating criteria. No secrets. This is a fully transparent process. It's embedded in the RFP, so we strongly recommend that you review the rating criteria. I do want to note that there are 2 aspects that we will really be evaluating on. We will, of course, be evaluating on many aspects, but you'll find that the application is organized into 2 major sections, and that's a program description and then your eagerness or willingness to participate in capacity building and technical assistance. Again, we encourage you strongly to look at that rating criteria as you develop your proposal. All proposals that we receive are reviewed and scored by a panel of community members, subject matter experts, and King County staff. There's more information in the RFP about the review process. Typically, a single proposal is reviewed by no fewer than 4 people on a panel. So that is, again, it's a fair process with multiple perspectives engaged, from community members to system staff to additional subject matter experts. You can appeal any decision that is made by the group, by the program, and by the staff. And then again, in the RFP, there is a process for how you go through that appeal process. Okay, so this is just sort of the tips and tricks portion of this. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things for you as you navigate the application and the budget, so that you just to sort of give you a heads up on them, I guess. Okay, The first one, I just said this a second ago, but I wanted to provide a little bit more information on it, is that it will primarily be assessed on 2 dimensions. And the first one is you will be asked to describe your program. We'll take a deeper dive in this a second, but I just want to say again that you don't have to have a fully baked program. You have to have demonstrate some clear preliminary or initial thinking on what this program would look like and why, and how that is directly related to the needs of the community and the strengths of the community, as well as what it is that the community wants. So you'll be evaluated on that and how it aligns with the RFP, and you'll be evaluated on your organization's interest and willingness to participate in capacity building and technical assistance, and that we are really asking questions around how's your organization going to carve out time to support your program manager or your executive director or program director, whomever you have quote unquote appointed to lead the program development work. How are you going to make their work feasible? And of course, we are providing compensation for the program development period, but how will you carve out the FTE and time for your staff to participate? So those are the kinds of things that we're going to be evaluating at a very high level. Of course, there's a lot of nuance to all of those, but just wanted to provide that frame for you. Okay, and then I wanted to call your attention to 3 things. So sort of the bulk of the RFP, as I'm sure you've observed and we've talked about this morning, is structured around three things: foundational principles, program requirements, and core components. And again, there's a lot of narrative in the RFP about what these are and what we're asking for. I just am drawing your attention here that there are questions in the application, questions 5, 6, 3, and 4, as you can see on the screen, that directly correlate to these concepts. So when you answer this question, you're really going to want to flip back to the RFP and those sections and look at them and reflect on them. So for the foundational principles question, we are literally asking, how does your program align with the foundational design principles outlined in the funding opportunity detail? Again, you are required to meet one of them, the equity one, and then there are 4 sort of optional design principles. The next bucket is program elements, or program requirements, excuse me. And so here we're asking, how does this meet the minimum program requirements outlined in 5 and 6? And again, those are the kinds of things we talked about with dosage and setting. And then the third bucket is core components. And again, these are, what is it that makes your program distinct and unique? What is it that makes up your program, and how is it rooted in the community? And so the questions that we're asking here are, what are those components? And then how are you going to put them into practice, right? And then how do you know that these are really well aligned with community? So again, I just wanted to draw your attention to the questions in the application directly aligning with what we've set forth in the RFP. Okay, just a couple final notes here, a couple final tips. First, I just wanted to note that you can apply as an organization or as a partnership. I don't anticipate a lot of partnership applications, but you're absolutely eligible to apply if you wish to do so. I want to note that there is no budget that is required for this RFP. The reason there is no budget is because for the first phase, phase 1, the 6-month program development phase, you will be paid per product. And so therefore, when you complete your practice profile, you'll receive payment. When you complete your theory of change, you'll receive payment. So there's no budget required for that. And then moving into phase 2, one of your deliverables, in phase 1 is developing a 2-year program budget. So that is when budget development will happen. But at this time, you do not need to submit one. And then finally, I wanted to call your attention to what is called the Capacity Building Participation Agreement. As I said before, we are evaluating on the organization's eagerness and interest in participating in the program development capacity building work. So programs are, if awarded, absolutely required to participate in this piece. And so we're asking you to go ahead and complete that agreement. Just wanted to call your attention to it because it's not included in all of the BSK proposals. Finally, I just wanted to share some resources that are available to you. If you have questions, you can email the contracts office. So cpress-bsk@kingcounty.gov. No questions can go directly to myself, so those have to go through CPRES. If they have specific program curiosities, they will engage me. Do encourage you to look at the glossary of terms for a list of relevant definitions. And then, again, just wanted to refer you to the checklist to make sure that your proposal is eligible for review. So we want to review everyone's proposal who goes through the hard work of completing it, and it's terribly disappointing for everyone when an application is disqualified because it hasn't met those requirements. So again, just encourage you to do that, to take a look at those carefully. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. We have 30 minutes should we need to take them. So that's a good chunk of time for anyone who has questions. I will go ahead and read the question out loud and provide an answer. Okay. So our first question is, our application will be a partnership between 3 and 4 organizations. Will there be room for all 3 to 4 organizations to participate in workshops, etc., associated with phase 1? So yes, there will be room for 3 to 4 members of a partnership. I think that's just fine. One thing I do want to note is I believe the application includes only up to 3, so a lead organization and 2 partner organizations. So you'll just sort of have to adapt, add 2 organizations under a partner organization slot if you end up applying for 4. But absolutely there would be room for everyone to participate in the workshops. The next question is, will bidders be allowed to include attachments to the proposal, such as an organizational chart, letters of support, sample curricula? While that sounds really exciting, and I'd love to review that, we are not allowed to accept any attachments which have not been specified in the RFP, and so we wouldn't be able to review any of those. Sure. So the next question, and it's a great question, is can you talk in more detail about what community-defined evidence look like? Sure. So community-defined evidence is really community-based ways of knowing, culturally specific ways of knowing. And so typically that is around, what are the norms in my community? And how do I know that this particular activity is derived from or aligns with or roots from this particular community value or ways of knowing? So at this time, you don't need to provide any data or evidence on what community ways of knowing are. We trust that as organizations are embedded in their community, they often know what community needs. And as we develop the practice profile work, we will actually be asking for organizations to work with their communities and really developing that evidence. So that could be a focus group or a community conversation to sort of document those ways of knowing, because there's incredibly valuable learning for all of us that will come out of that, but you don't have to justify it with data. It's culturally rooted ways of knowing. The next question is, are current BSK grantees eligible for this non-evidence-based opportunity too? So let's unpack that a little bit. So an organization implementing an evidence-based practice, such as parent-child home program, parents as teachers, community-based doula, your organization can apply, but you cannot apply for the evidence-based practice. So one thing that I think will inevitably come up is that there could be a situation in which an organization uses an evidence-based model but wants to do a really substantive adaptation. So not just a little adaptation, but one that substantively changes the program. If that's the case, it would be eligible. It would need to meet all of the other criteria, and again, it would have to be a substantively different program change. The next question is, what if the program model is largely developed, already implemented in some communities, but just not implemented in a specific King County communities? Sure. So if a program model is developed and is being implemented, but not in King County, I think I'm going to sort of blanketly say yes, it would be eligible to apply with a number of caveats. If it has substantive research evidence behind it, then it's not eligible to apply. We are really trying to cultivate the development of programs that don't have the kind of support it takes to develop a lot of research evidence. So if it doesn't have an RCT or a comparison study, then it would be eligible. I would also say that I want to think hard about this question of if you're implementing it everywhere else or in other communities, is it designed to meet a local King County community need? Again, that is the purpose of this. I think so without comprehensive information, I can't answer that fully, but I think those are the kinds of things that you would want to think about when you're thinking about the application itself. I think the last thing I would add there is that we value deeply, as we've outlined in the RFP and also as we've included in the application questions, we want organizations who want to go through the program development process, that are excited about that opportunity. So we would also want to make sure that you want to participate in the program development piece, that it won't feel like a redundancy or a step backwards in the work. The next question is, regarding the program requirement that 60% of services take place in the home, if 40% are community-based, would BSK fund those activities also, or just the services that take place in the home? So we are thinking about the program that you're developing right now as we're sort of thinking, or the program that you would apply through this funding opportunity is sort of a holistic program. And so it may include some home-based elements, it may include some community-based elements. As long as the families receiving the home-based elements are the families participating in the community-based elements, then as far as we're concerned, that's the program and we're paying for it. So we would be sort of supporting the development of the program as long as it's on the same set of families. I hope that is clarifying. And there's also another community-based opportunity that's coming up. I'm looking at my colleague who's in the room with me. And so if this would be a better fit for that, I think you would just want to think about where it fits most and the extent to which the services you're offering are necessarily delivered in the home-based context or setting. Okay. Did you see another question, Erin, that you wanted me to?
Did you get that one already?
Oh, I didn't. Thank you so much. So the next question is, I would like to propose a project in partnership with one of the established home visiting programs listed as ineligible, but my organization will take the lead. Is this type of program eligible for funding under this announcement? I think that depends on what you're implementing. If you are implementing a home visiting program that is evidence-based or deemed ineligible, then no. it would not be eligible for this program. Again, if you are taking, the purpose of this is to cultivate home visiting programs that are deeply embedded in the community, or to build on ones that have already been operating but really want to actively participate in developing or strengthening or improving or customizing the model. What we don't want to do is use this as an opportunity to fund more evidence-based programs, because we already have revenue streams that are specifically associated with those models, right? So if you want to apply for one of the evidence-based models, then no. If you want to take an evidence-based model and do a really substantive adaptation, that could be eligible, though I still don't think it would be a priority. So I hope that answers your question. I guess one other thing I would say is, if you are applying in partnership with an organization that does an evidence-based program, but you're partnering to design a different or new program, that is perfectly acceptable. Did you have other thoughts about that? No.
No.
Okay. That seems.
We need to be really clear.
Okay.
So let's let people on the phone, if they have any questions, weigh in.
Okay, so our communications staff has unmuted the phones, so if there's anyone who wants to raise a question on the phone, please feel free to do so.
And you will need to unmute yourself. You've simply been given the option to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Erin. So the next question is, can part of the program development phase one be focused on doing the RCT and comparison studies? So at this time, we do not have resources to support randomized control studies or comparison studies. Phase one will be focused on the program development products that we've identified in the RFP exclusively. That is what the capacity building team that we're building that we are funding has been contracted to do. And I will say that moving into phase two efforts, as Sarah J. pointed out, we will have a deep dive evaluation. They will conduct evaluations of the theory of change and other programmatic elements, but we cannot support RCTs or comparison studies at this time. Any other thoughts or questions? Okie dokie. Well, those were some really excellent questions. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. We're super excited about this funding opportunity. And again, should you want to attend one of the other information sessions, there's one this afternoon in Snoqualmie, and also one on Wednesday morning in White Center. So thank you so much.